more to it here because he's a sign. Right? What's he a sign of? Well, I want to tell you Scott Hahn's interpretation of the dragon, which I think has some merit, and I think also points to the greater reality of what the dragon represents. Okay? And the reason why I'm going to point out his interpretation, because he points out why the dragon is red. He sees the dragon as the devil, but it's also a greater sign of an earthly power. He believes it's Herod's dynasty. Remember King Herod? The one who tried to do what to Jesus? When he was a baby. So right after he was born, he wanted to devour him. Now here's an interesting bit of information you may not have known about Herod the Great. He had 10 successors. How many horns does this dragon have? 10 horns. Horns represent authorities, earthly rulers. We get that from Daniel chapter 7. We'll explain more of that when we get to the beasts of chapter 13. Just know right now, the symbolism of horns means earthly power or authority. For good or for bad, it just is earthly power and authority. And that's established in Daniel. So this dragon has horns, and that represents earthly power and authority. Now, why the red? Well, it's interesting to note that Herod the Great and his successors, his dynasty, were not Jews. They were Edomites. So, Edomites are descendants of Esau. Jacob and Esau, remember that? Mm-hmm. Esau in Hebrew means red. So the dragon is red, representing Esau, and that supports his theory that this is a representation of Herod and his dynasty, who started to kill Jesus when he was born, and then later tried to destroy the church, but was stopped 10 dynasties into it. Now, I think he has some merit to that. I think that there's something to be said for that. But, Chip, it says that he's the devil. Herod wasn't the devil. You know, the devil. No. But he was an instrument of the devil. You see that? And when we get to chapter 13, we're going to find out that the beast that rises out of the sea is, if you will, sponsored and powered by the devil. And if the beast that rises out of the sea is representative of earthly powers, then the spiritual power behind it is influenced by the devil. Okay? So in a literal sense, one could say that the great red dragon has a meaning to an earthly character or characters, Herod and his dynasty. Just like the woman clothed with the sun is Mary and Israel. You see what I'm saying? There's more to it than just getting stuck with saying it's the devil and that's all there is. There's more here that you can dig out of. Okay? Now, what about the 7 heads and the 10 horns? Why is the devil depicted like that? Well, as I said, horns represent earthly power. Okay? So this is in contrast to what? All of the ruling and reigning in heaven that we've been hearing about, the woman with a crown of stars, the lamb that's being worshipped as being starting to rule, the rod of iron that he's going to rule, if you get it. So God is really ruling in heaven with all of this authority. The devil is being a reflection of that. He's trying to rule on the earth. You see that? And his symbol are horns, these earthly powers, which mean nothing because God ultimately is the one that puts all the earthly powers into power. You following me? Okay, but what about the 7 and the 10? What is that? The devil perverts everything good of God. One interpretation of this is the 7 represents the 3 cardinal virtues, the 3 theological virtues and the 4 cardinal virtues. But he perverts it into his own deadly sins, if you will. And the horns, the way that the fathers pictured it is that there are 2 horns on the 3 heads that represent the anti-theological virtues and 1 horn on the cardinal virtues. So when you add that up, that's 10. It's a perversion of those elements, those graces, if you will, that God gives. Just a thought, just to throw it out there. All right? I think Scott Hahn's idea is a little bit closer to the reality here, and it points to all future rulers that do not follow God, but instead follow the devil, like Herod. Not saying he was possessed by the devil or anything like that, but he was certainly an instrument used by Satan to try and destroy and thwart Jesus and his church. Do you see that? And in the future, all other earthly powers and rulers who seek to kill and destroy the church, like the Caesars of Rome, and all the way up through to the 20th century. Right, any of those earthly powers, the spiritual power behind them is the devil, because it's not of God to thwart the church and the people of God. Are you with me? We're going to see this in greater form when we turn to chapter 13 and look through the image of the beasts. Now, give me just 2 minutes and I'll help answer Marie's question. Why this war in heaven idea? It seems out of time and out of place. Yes and no. What? You have to go back to the gospel account. In Luke chapter 10, there's a very interesting statement that Jesus makes. Luke chapter 10. The first part talks about how Jesus sends out the 70 disciples to go and preach. They're very excited to return to Jesus to give them their report on what happened. Verse 16 of chapter 10. Jesus says, when you go out, he who hears you hears me. He who rejects you rejects me. And he who rejects me rejects him who sent me. Verse 17, look at this. The 70 returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons are subject to us in your name. And he said to them, now look what Jesus said. I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. What What does that have to do with this good report? Keep reading. Behold, I have given you authority to tread upon serpents and scorpions and all the power of the enemy. Nothing shall hurt you. Nevertheless, rejoice in this. Nevertheless, do not rejoice in this, that the spirits are subject to you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. But why did Jesus say, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven? Didn't that happen at the dawn of time? You see, when Satan fell from heaven, he was cast out, but he has had a power and authority to go back to accuse all of us before the throne of God. When God's will and God's way and God's kingdom is advanced, his place in heaven is thwarted. This happens constantly. So it was a one-time event at the beginning of time when the first angels fell. But since then, he himself has been granted a certain amount of, if you will, leeway to continue to accuse the church, and back in the old days, Israel, before God. But whenever God's kingdom is advanced, his place in heaven is lost. So it's something that is forever happening. So it's a one-time event, and it's something that's continuously going on as God's kingdom is always advancing. Satan's place is removed from heaven. He falls like lightning from heaven. Jesus said, I saw it. It always happens that way. Yes?
How we got to St. Michael prayer, isn't it that Leo saw Satan and Jesus in heaven?
Yes. He said he saw the smoke of Satan enter the church, and by praying this prayer, it was dispelled. It's the same idea. Satan still has this liberty to go before God, but he is thwarted whenever the kingdom advances. His place is not secure. He knows he has a short time. All he can do is accuse, but God has given us the victory over that. Yes?
So pretty much the war continues until the end of time.
Yes, that's it. Now you got it. The war continues until the end of time. That's a very good way. That's a very good way to end that idea. So it does describe an event that did happen in time past, and it's something that continuously goes on. Because Jesus talked about Satan falling like lightning when he was alive. And now we're hearing it again. The moral to the story is the advancement of the kingdom whenever we advance. And Satan will fall. Whenever the kingdom advances, Satan falls. And that will continue to happen until the end of time. And with that, next week we'll start chapter 13 with the beasts and the Antichrist. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.